It's vitally important that the U.S. command more respect than we do today.
One of the most surprising storylines from the early 2020 Democratic presidential primary has been the emergence of 37-year-old Pete Buttigieg on the national stage. The mayor of South Bend, Indiana is polling among the top 5 in a crowded field and achieved a national prominence few anticipated when he announced his candidacy in April. One of the key focuses of Pete Buttigieg's campaign so far has been his status as a naval reservist and as an Afghanistan war veteran. He's one of 3 post-9/11 veterans in the Democratic presidential field this year, but he's the first since the recent wars began to really break into that upper echelon of fundraising and of polling. So we're here in South Bend to interview Mayor Pete about what that would mean for him to be Commander-in-Chief and how his veteran status influences his priorities. Mayor, thanks for sitting down with us. We wanted to talk to you because you're a gay Democrat from a town that's got a major university. I don't think that's the criteria most people would have thought of when they think of the veteran that's going to break into the national conversation. Is that wrong of me to think that way? Is that wrong to think that you're breaking the mold in some way?
People can try to size you up by your profile, but if you tried to figure me based on that, it wouldn't get you very far. I'm a millennial, gay, Episcopalian veteran mayor from a blue city in a very red state. I think it's just evidence of how you got to get to know people individually.
So let's talk about, Commander-in-Chief, not a small title there. What is your vision for what that should be? What are your priorities when you hear Commander-in-Chief? What are you going to do different from the current guy? What are you going to do different from President Trump, who is serving that role right now?
Well, I think as president, I'll have 2 big jobs when it comes to the Commander-in-Chief role. The first is to establish a higher and clearer bar for when we're going to use military force. The way that this administration has kind of casually thrown around the idea of getting the military involved in Venezuela or militarizing the U.S. border or escalating things with Iran, I think doesn't really reflect a clear-headed sense of what thresholds you do apply for decisions about the use of force. The second big task is going to be restoring U.S. credibility around the world. We have not been this badly off in terms of respect among nations, especially our allies, as long as I've been alive and quite a bit longer than that. And it's vitally important that the U.S. command more respect than we do today.
So being a veteran, does that make you, I guess, more reluctant to commit to force? I mean, we've heard a lot of tough talk from the administration, but not necessarily committing the troops there. It's threatening the stick, but not actually using it. How do you find that line between when to actually deploy versus when to just send a stern message and remind those foes we do have a very strong military?
Well, I think part of what you get from having been in a conflict is a sense of the gravity of some of the forces they're playing with. So what worries me most about, for example, the Iran situation isn't so much the president's intentions as the competence in the White House right now, the possibility that they could initiate something that gets away from them. In other words, the dynamics over there could reach a point where the White House actually loses control of an escalation. I think when you've deployed, you understand that we have military force for a reason, and we maintain the best fighting force in the world for a reason, and we should be prepared to use it to defend the homeland, to prevent attacks on American soil or on American interests and people. The other thing is that those who served in the Afghanistan conflict have an especially strong sense of just how hard it is to end the conflict. I thought I was one of the last guys turning out the lights when I left ISAF headquarters. That was 5 years ago, and we're still arguing over how to get out. It's a reminder of how difficult it is to wrap up a conflict once you're in one.
You have on-the-ground experience there. You know how long this war's dragged on. What is your plan for Afghanistan?
Well, to me, we can't be the guarantors of full peace, prosperity, and democracy over there. What we should do is do our part to support a democratically elected government that'll be friendly to the U.S. But that doesn't mean an open-ended commitment of troops on the ground. Sure, we can have intelligence capabilities. Sure, we can have special forces capabilities to prevent another attack on the homeland. But beyond that, I think it's time to go.
If Mayor Pete becomes President Pete, do we have troops on the ground in Afghanistan in 2024?
We got to wrap this up, and so my expectation is that we will not have ground troops much longer than when I arrive in office. Again, we may need to maintain some kind of special ops capability. That's understandable, but we can't just be there indefinitely and expect any different result than we've had in the last going on 20 years.
Do you worry that the military has gotten sucked into politics in a way that it didn't in the past?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, look, individual service members have opinions and strong ones, and that's fine. But I always knew, and I think every professional service member knows, when you put on the uniform, you put away your politics. And by the same token, the president ought to know that troops are not there to decorate his political ambitions. They're there to defend the Constitution with their lives. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, you should know that your president only views your service as a sacred trust and as something to help defend the nation, not as something to be politicized and turned into a shiny backdrop.
Now, you joined the military after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, but you've seen the transgender. I'm sorry. Did you join
it was still policy when I joined.
So why? I mean, with your background, why did you join then? Why was that not a deterrent to say, I don't want to be part of this kind of organization?
Well, I think it definitely made a lot of people think twice. But at the end of the day, I wanted to serve, and that trumped everything else. I wanted to make myself useful. But it was frustrating to know that I could lose my job. And what was amazing after I did come out, after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, was that I heard from so many other people who are in the same boat. Good service members, good soldiers, good sailors, who were in the exact same boat, and I think found it harder to do their job because they had that extra pressure of not being able to talk about their home life the way that, I mean, what's more of a military tradition than talking about your spouse and your kids and your life at home, whether you're proud of them or whether you're grumbling about it. Just the ability to do that. It's actually a really important part. Ironically, it's a really important part of unit cohesion that only became available when we did away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Did it make you reconsider it at all after you joined?
No, but it made it harder.
We've got the transgender issue now and the repeal of some of the rules that Obama put in place by the Trump administration. What's the next step there? How do you feel, not only what's your position on that, but how do we get away from where we are now, which is a lot of folks who feel like they had one set of rules and had it swept out from under them, even if you were to go back to what the Obama-era transgender rules were. Right. You're going to have a lot of folks who just don't trust the institution to stick with that.
Yeah, again, it's a huge distraction for service members, even if they don't lose their careers. And if they do, then it's also a huge injustice, especially because it's being served up at the hands of a president who faked a disability to avoid serving when it was his turn. We can do so much better in this country. And I think that any institution, especially the military, ought to judge people based on the job you're doing. And if you're doing a good job, you ought to get promoted. And if you're not, there's consequences for that. And all the other stuff needs to be taken off the table. For some reason, this president thinks there's some political advantage in picking on people who are already vulnerable because of who they are. But if they're ready to serve and their evaluations show that they're doing a good job, why would you hold something unrelated to that against them?
Talk to me about veterans today, and especially the VA, because that's been another big focus of the president. How do you feel VA is working or not working?
You know, when I talk to veterans who really depend on the VA or look to the VA for medical care, you hear two things. One is that they're frustrated with the state of affairs, and the other is that they do not want it to be privatized or replaced. You know, we have the VA for a reason, and one of those reasons is different wars have different wounds. We never would have been able as a country to learn how to deal with Agent Orange or traumatic brain injury or PTSD if it weren't for some of the work done within the VA that's specially designed to respond to those things. But the wait times are too long, the distance you got to drive sometimes is too far. The struggle to get mental health on par with physical health is not complete, and far too many people are still left outside of the system. So it's clear we've got to do a better job, and that involves bringing new tools to bear. It means using technology in new ways. Not so much asking veterans to be masters of technology, especially if they're from an older generation, but under the hood, using technology to simplify the processing and reduce these waits that everybody's subjected to. But I think we can do that without turning this over to the private sector for people to make money off of and expecting that that'll somehow make it all better.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.